In this video, we're going to look at factoring trinomials in a specific form, and that form is x squared plus bx plus c. And I've made the b and the c colors because they're going to represent numbers. So in other words, what we're going to do, let me put up an example and then we'll take a step back. Let's say I have something like x squared plus 6x plus 5. Okay? So we're going to want to factor that. Notice this is in the form x squared plus bx plus c. The b value in this case is 6, and the c value in this case is 5. Alright, I'll make that red for 5, and I could go back and make this blue. Okay. Key here is that in these types of problems, there is only a coefficient of 1. It's not going to be written, but it's just going to be an x squared, so you could think of it as 1x squared. Now, I have a ton of other videos on factoring trinomials where there's a number in front of the x squared. This video is specifically if there is just a 1 multiplied by the x squared. So the good news is these are pretty straightforward once you get the hang of it. And in order to motivate this conversation, I want to go back over here and let's just put this in the corner. And let's remember how we multiplied binomials. Alright, let's say we've got something like x plus 3 binomial times x plus 7. And we want to multiply that together. So we used something called FOIL. First, outside, inside, last. So the first was multiplying the first two terms in each parenthesis, x times x. The outside was x times 7, which are the outside terms, 7x. The I was the inside, which stands for the inside terms. And the last term in each set of parentheses, we multiply those together. Then we combine like terms. And we end up with this trinomial. Now notice this trinomial is of the form 1x squared plus bx plus c. So what we're attempting to do now by factoring is to undo that process. So I would give you this trinomial right here, and you would have to figure out what two binomials multiply together to give that trinomial. And figuring that out is all in the FOIL. Let me show you what I mean. When you're trying to figure out the two binomials, let's say we go back over here and we're going to try to figure out the two binomials that multiply to give this together. Let's think about how we would have got this x squared plus 6x plus 5. All right, where would that x squared have come from? Where did this x squared come from? Well, it came from the fact that we did x times x. That's where it came from. So we know that the first thing in each set of parentheses has to be an x and an x. So if we FOIL this together, we will get x squared, and that's how we can check. We can FOIL this together. All right, where did the 21 come from? Well, it came from doing 3 times 7. So this 5 is going to come from this number times this number, and it has to give 5. Well, in this case, there's only one possibility. It has to be 5. That's not always going to be the case, and we'll talk about what to do with that. But this has to be a 5 and a 5, or 5 and a 1 to multiply to be 5. Now let's look at where did that 10 come from. Well, the 10 came from the 7x plus the 3x, and that came from the outside times the inside, the outside plus the inside. So we had the 7x plus the 3x, and that gave us the 10x. So the two numbers that multiplied together to be 21, the two numbers that multiplied together to be 21 had to add together to be 10. And if we can find those two numbers, 7 and 3, then we know those are the two numbers that have to be in the binomials in the parentheses before we do the FOIL. So if you look over here and you say, well, what two numbers multiply to be 5 and add to be 6? That has to be 5 and 1. And in this case, everything's positive, so we would make those positive. We'll do a more difficult one here in a second. But we could check this by FOILing this together. So I would go x squared plus 1x for the outside plus 5x for the inside, plus 5 times 1 is 5, and if I combine like terms, I get that, which is my original problem, and boom, I have my answer. Okay, so that's the idea. Let's see if I can erase a bunch here. Let's start with a new problem. And what we're looking for then are two numbers that multiply to be some number and add to be another number. So I'll show you how to set this up so it goes smoothly. Let's just stick with positives for now. We'll do a negative one in a second. But let's pick one that's got some more possibilities. Let's do this. X squared plus 8x plus 12. Okay? So we want to factor that. So we'll set up our two parentheses. We know that whatever goes here and here has to multiply to be x squared, so that has to be x and x. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take the number that's in the C spot right here, and we need to figure out two numbers that multiply to be C. Alright, I'll put little boxes here. We got to figure out what these numbers are. And add to be whatever the middle number is, the middle term, which is 8, the coefficient there. All right, can you think of two numbers that would multiply to be 12 and add to be 8? My advice is to think of the numbers that multiply to be 12. Don't think of all the numbers that can add to be 8, because that's a lot of possibilities. So for 12, we've got 1 times 12, 2 times 6, that looks like a winner, and 3 times 4. So 2 times 6 gives 12, and it also adds to be 8. So we're going to put plus 2 plus 6. Now it doesn't matter what order you do this. You could have put plus 6 and plus 2. These are the two numbers that add to be 12 and multiply to be 8. So notice if you FOIL this together, you'll get x squared plus 6x plus 2x plus 12, which gives you your original trinomial. All right, that's all there is to it. So this part that I'm writing out over here in this green circle, you know, if you're still kind of struggling with this, I would suggest writing that out, but pretty soon you'll be able to do that in your head. All right, let's try another one. Let's try one with some negatives. I'm going to make this one kind of the same, except I'm going to put some negatives in here. Let's say we do x squared minus 8x plus 12. All right, so now I need to think of two numbers that multiply to be positive 12. That's your C value here. But they need to add to give negative 8, since the middle term is negative 8. So what two numbers multiply to be 12 and add to be negative 8? Give you a second to think about that. What do you think? How about negative 6 and negative 2? Those multiply to be positive 12 and add to be negative 8. So our answer, I'm going to set up our two binomials. We've got x, and then since we need a negative 6 and a negative 2, we're going to go minus 6 minus 2. That's it. That's all there is to it. All right, let's try a couple more maybe. Maybe you could try it, pause the video. Let's try x squared. I'll change up the numbers here a little bit. How about minus 3x minus 10? All right, why don't you pause the video, try that, and then start it when you're ready. All right, so I'm going to set up my parentheses. I got x and x. I need to think of two numbers that multiply to be negative 10 and add to be negative 3. Well, since they're going to multiply to be negative 10, I know it's going to be one positive and one negative. And it's either 1 and 10 or 5 and 2. So since I need a 3, it's going to be 5 and 2. And since I need a negative 3, it's going to be negative 5 and positive 2. Those multiply to be negative 10 and add to be negative 3. So one of my parentheses is going to be x minus 5, and the other one is going to be x plus 2. And that's how it works, okay? So that's all there is to it for these kind of trinomials. Now, word of warning, this only works when there's a 1x squared. If there's a number like In other videos, I'll show you how to do 2x squared plus x minus 3. Okay, if this is a 2x squared, you can't use this technique. You have to use some other technique. But I like to call these the easy trinomials if they have a 1x squared in the front. So to see how to multiply something with a 2x squared, just look at my other videos about factoring.